six-way breakdown. Cutting through the spin. Exposing the truth. Liberty Ledger.
He'd need just 43 minutes. 43 minutes to completely tear down 7 years of a meticulously crafted public image. In those 43 minutes, he would expose how the former bartender-turned-congresswoman, who often spoke about working families, had actually cost regular working folks thousands of dollars, and how she, who called for climate sacrifice, had spent a staggering $30,000 on Uber rides. He would also reveal her claims of trauma that never happened, which she then used to fundraise millions of dollars. She arrived at the Senate hearing, fully prepared for a battle. Little did she know, she was walking straight into an execution. The country lawyer from Louisiana never once raised his voice. He didn't have to. He simply asked questions. Very straightforward questions. Questions any everyday working person would naturally ask. And when he finished, even her 14 million Instagram followers couldn't come to her rescue. The Senate Budget Committee hearing room itself seemed to bear the heavy weight of institutional power. Dark wood paneling, a raised dais for the senators, and a witness table placed beneath them, almost like an altar awaiting judgment, set the scene. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like ominous warning beacons. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez approached the witness table with the self-assuredness of someone who had perfected the art of going viral. At just 35, she had transformed from a bartender to a congresswoman in under 10 years, gathering an impressive 14 million Instagram followers along that journey. She wore a perfectly tailored burgundy blazer, her makeup impeccable for the cameras. Her squad members sat in the gallery, proudly wearing AOC shirts in a show of solidarity. The press section was packed with progressive media, all eager to capture her anticipated performance. Meanwhile, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat calmly at the committee table, arranging manila folders with methodical precision. At 73, with his white hair slightly disheveled and reading glasses perched on his nose, he looked like a grandfather about to share vacation photos. But those who truly knew him recognized that stance. A predator carefully setting up his tools before the hunt began. The hearing's stated topic seemed quite straightforward: fiscal reality and progressive policy proposals. However, Kennedy's staff had been doing some serious digging for weeks. The folders in front of him were filled with ammunition that could very well end careers. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez," Kennedy began, his Louisiana drawl stretching syllables like warm taffy, "I truly do appreciate you joining us today. I know you're a very busy young lady." "Thank you, Senator Kennedy," AOC responded with her familiar media-ready warmth. "I'm always happy to discuss how we can build a more just economy." "Well, now that's good to hear. Real good." Kennedy adjusted his glasses and pulled out the very first document, her congressional financial disclosure. See, before we talk about building anything, I think we should establish some basic understanding of numbers. Now, I'm 3 years old. I was practicing law before you were even born. I spent 17 years as Louisiana State Treasurer, managing billions of dollars, and had to account for every single penny. He looked up from his papers, fixing her with that mild, questioning expression that had utterly dismantled countless witnesses before her. "So when I see numbers that don't quite add up, I tend to notice things. And your numbers, young lady, well, they've got me a little bit puzzled." Kennedy then displayed her financial disclosure on the overhead screen. "According to these official documents you filed with the House, you earn a $104,000 per year. That's a very decent salary, putting you in the top 10% of American earners. Nothing to scoff at." He then pulled out photographs: AOC getting into her Tesla, entering her D.C. apartment building, and attending various events in designer clothes. But you drive a $64,000 Tesla Model 3. That's about twice what the average American spends on a car, wouldn't you say? You live in a luxury apartment in the Navy Yards neighborhood. It's a nice building with an infinity pool, I'm told, and you wear some pretty mighty fine clothes to all those fancy events. Kennedy looked at her with what seemed like genuine curiosity. So my simple question is, how exactly do you afford all of that on your congressional salary? AOC delivered her well-rehearsed answer about budgeting and making smart financial choices. Kennedy nodded slowly, much like you might when someone tries to explain that the moon is made of cheese. Well, I'm sure you're very fiscally responsible. We'll come back to that. He then opened a new folder and pulled out a photograph that had been seen all over the world. It showed AOC in her white Tax the Rich dress at the Met Gala, surrounded by celebrities and billionaires. Now, I've never actually been to the Met Gala, Kennedy said conversationally. Not invited, I suppose, but I did look it up. $30,000 for a ticket. That's more than half the median American household income just for one party. He let that thought linger. Your dress said, "Tax the Rich," which is a pretty bold statement at a party full of billionaires, kind of like wearing a Go Vegan shirt to a steakhouse, as my grandson might put it. Several people in the gallery quietly chuckled. Kennedy's expression remained perfectly pleasant. But here's what truly interests me about this photograph, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. Not the dress, not the party, and not even the billionaires. He then pulled out official House Ethics Committee documents. You were investigated by the House Ethics Committee for your attendance at this event. And you know what they found? Kennedy looked directly at her, his voice taking on a harder edge, despite maintaining that same slow draw. You didn't pay your bills to working people. The room went silent. AOC's confident expression flickered. Now, let's talk about those unpaid bills, shall we? Kennedy then pulled out a stack of invoices, each marked with red stamps reading overdue or sent to collections. He handled them with the care of a prosecutor presenting murder weapons. The House Ethics Committee's investigation into your Met Gala attendance was quite thorough. They found some interesting things. Let me walk through them. He held up the first invoice. Patricia Davenport, a small business owner from Brooklyn, runs her own makeup service. She did your makeup for the Met Gala. Sent you an invoice for $344.85. That was September 2021. Kennedy looked up from the document. Miss Davenport sent you 3 reminders. 3. She waited 6 months. Finally, she had no choice. She sent it to a collections agency, marked it extremely overdue. Do you know what that does to a small business owner's finances, young lady? He didn't wait for an answer. It means she couldn't pay her own bills while waiting for you to pay yours. She's a single mother with 2 kids. $344 might not seem like much to someone who goes to $30,000 parties, but to her, that's groceries for a month. Kennedy set down that invoice and picked up another. Then there's the hairstylist. $477.73. Took you nearly a year to pay. The stylist had to send a letter to your staff. Kennedy read from it slowly. It would look terrible if we had to file a complaint with the New York Department of Labor against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's a threat to file a labor violation against you, the congresswoman who talks about protecting workers. Another invoice. Hotel Carly Lele, $4,062.92. 8 months. 8 months. Those hotel workers, housekeepers, front desk staff, kitchen workers waited for payment while you posted on Instagram about fighting for working families. Kennedy stacked the invoices methodically, and the dress rental, $990, also months overdue. He did the arithmetic on a notepad, writing large enough for cameras to capture. Total $6,413 unpaid to working people, while you drove your $64,000 car, while you lived in your luxury apartment, while you became one of the most famous members of Congress. Kennedy removed his glasses and looked at AOC with something that might have been disappointment. Young lady, you talk about fighting for working families. You make speeches about economic justice. But when working people asked you to pay them, people who served you, who made you look good for your big fancy party, you ignored them. For months, some had to threaten legal action just to get paid. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Now, I'm just a country lawyer from Louisiana, but where I come from, we call that hypocrisy. AOC tried to respond about staff errors and oversight, but Kennedy was already moving to the next point. But the Met Gala is just one example of what I'm talking about. Let's look at your lifestyle more broadly. Kennedy pulled out more documents, property records, campaign finance reports, and photos from her social media. Your Tesla, $64,000. That's twice the average car price in America. How many working families in your district can afford that? Your Navy Yards apartment? I looked up the building. $2,000 per month minimum. It has an infinity pool, gym, and rooftop terrace. Very nice. Meanwhile, the average rent in your Bronx district is $1,600, and most families are struggling to pay that. He displayed photos from her Instagram, designer clothes at multiple events, $1,000 blazers, high-end accessories, all while telling working people they need to sacrifice more. Kennedy pulled out the most recent scandal, campaign finance disclosures from just weeks earlier. And this is fresh. December 2024. Your campaign spending reports just came out. You used campaign donations, money from working people who believe in you to stay at luxury hotels and dine at upscale restaurants during a trip to Puerto Rico. He read from the report, 5-star accommodations, premium catering services, elite venues. Kennedy looked up. The National Republican Congressional Committee called it, and I quote, peak hypocrisy from a walking scam. But Kennedy wasn't done. And then there's your grandmother, your Abua. Remember when you posted those photos of her house in Puerto Rico? Roof damaged, walls crumbling? You posted them to attack Republicans, said they didn't care about Puerto Rico. A Kennedy displayed of the photos AOC herself had posted. But here's the funny thing. You never actually helped her. You make $174,000 a year. You drive a $64,000 car, but you couldn't find a few $1,000s to fix your own grandmother's roof. And do you know who actually ended up fixing it? Conservative donors stepped up, raised the funds, and got the job done. Your own family members and complete strangers had to come to her aid. All because you wouldn't. Kennedy's voice held a tone of genuine bewilderment. Young lady, where I grew up, family always comes first. You look after your own people. My mama raised me right there in Middletown, Louisiana. We didn't have a lot, but we always made sure to take care of each other. If her roof was leaking, I would have been up there fixing it myself long before I ever thought about buying some fancy car. He neatly gathered the stack of invoices and photos. So, this is the pattern that I'm seeing emerge. You stand up there preaching about working families, all while you're stiffing actual working people. You demand that everyone else makes sacrifices, yet you live a life of luxury. You talk endlessly about economic justice on social media, but you totally ignored your own grandmother's needs. You built this whole brand around being a voice for the working class, but the second you got to Congress, You started living just like the very elites you claim to oppose. Kennedy then leaned back in his chair. Now, maybe I'm being a little unfair here. After all, you're quite famous for your economic policy proposals. So let's talk about your biggest achievement, the Green New Deal. Kennedy pulled out a slim 14-page document, holding it up almost like a strange artifact. Back in February 2019, you introduced this resolution alongside Senator Ed Markey. The Green New Deal declared it absolutely essential for saving our planet. It certainly grabbed a lot of attention, and people still talk about it today. So, let's really discuss it. He then opened it to the very first page. Just 14 pages, that's all. 14 pages to completely restructure the entire American economy. Now, when I served as state treasurer, our annual budget document alone stretched for over 1,000 pages. We had to meticulously account for every single dollar, every program, every possible contingency, but you somehow thought you could remake America in just 14 pages. Kennedy then produced an economic analysis. The American Action Forum, they're a nonpartisan think tank. They carefully studied your plan, trying to nail down what it would truly cost. Do you want to know what they discovered? He wrote a series of numbers on a board. $93 trillion over 10 years. Now, I'm just a simple country lawyer, but even I know that's a whole lot of zeros. Kennedy proceeded to do the arithmetic slowly, meticulously showing his work, much like a patient teacher. There are approximately 130 million households across America. If you divide 93 trillion by 130 million, it equals, he wrote, 750 TVs, 380 filers per household. So that comes out to about $715,000 per household over a decade, which is roughly $71,500 every single year. Every year for 10 years straight. He looked directly at AOC. The median household income in America is currently around $70,000. So you're essentially asking average families to spend more than their entire annual income, not just their extra spending money, but their total income, just on this one program, before they even buy groceries, pay rent, or do anything else. Kennedy's voice then took on a tone of genuine concern. Young lady, please help me understand this. If these families spend all their money on the Green New Deal, how exactly are they supposed to eat? Before AOC could even respond, Kennedy pulled out his phone and quickly connected it to the audio system. But perhaps I'm just missing something obvious. Maybe you explained the economics of this a lot better when you were out promoting it. So, let's just watch what you had to say then. He played a video of AOC from January 2019, live on Instagram. She said, "The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change, and your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it?" And then she declared, "This is our World War II." Kennedy paused the video and then pulled out a calendar. You said that back in January of 2019, so 12 years from then would bring us to, he slowly counted on his fingers, January 2031. That's just 6 years from right now. He looked at AOC with an air of exaggerated concern. Should I really be making plans for Christmas 2030? Or is the world actually going to end before then? I'm asking you seriously, ma'am, because if the world truly is ending, I absolutely need to tell my grandchildren. A wave of laughter rippled through the gallery. Kennedy's expression, however, remained completely earnest. I mean, you literally said it yourself on video. You used those words to push your policy. So either you genuinely believed the world was going to literally end, or you were just using fear to manipulate people. Which one was it? AOC attempted to explain that it was merely rhetorical, meant to convey a sense of urgency. Kennedy nodded slowly. Rhetorical, you say? I see. So, when you tell people the world is going to end, they're supposed to instinctively know that you don't really mean it. Got it. He then pulled out a stack of campaign finance reports. But here, for me, is the most interesting part about your Green New Deal. One of its primary goals is to eliminate fossil fuel vehicles, correct? It's all about getting Americans out of their cars and onto public transit, drastically cutting carbon emissions from transportation. Kennedy then displayed FEC filings right there on the screen. These are your official campaign spending reports from 2018 and 2019. Your campaign headquarters was located in Queens, New York. Do you want to know how far it was from the subway station? He paused for a dramatic effect. A 1-minute walk, just 60 seconds. I actually timed it myself on Google Maps. Kennedy continued to read from the reports. Campaign spending on Uber and Lyft rides, $29,165. Campaign spending on subway fares, $8,035. He then did the math directly on his notepad. That's 3.5 times more money poured into cars than into public transit. All while you were out there telling Americans they absolutely had to ditch their cars and embrace public transportation. Your own campaign headquarters was literally just a minute from the subway, yet you managed to rack up $30,000 in Uber rides. Kennedy glanced up. And now, what do you drive? A $64,000 Tesla. But do you know where that electricity actually comes from? Roughly 60% of it is from fossil fuels, like coal and natural gas. So you're essentially still burning fossil fuels, just with a few extra steps and a much fancier ride. He neatly gathered his papers. Young lady, this is a classic example of do as I say, not as I do. You demand immense sacrifice from working families. You tell them, give up your cars. Shell out $70,000 a year for the Green New Deal. And live with less. Yet, you're constantly taking Ubers, driving a luxury electric car, and not making a single sacrifice yourself. Kennedy leaned in slightly. But perhaps I'm being a bit too hard on you again. After all, you do hold an economics degree from Boston University. That's a really good school. And they certainly teach economics there. So you must surely grasp how economies actually function. Let's dive into your economic expertise, shall we? Kennedy then pulled out a transcript of AOC's diploma from Boston University, showing her degree in economics and international relations. Now, Boston University, a very good school, costs around $60,000 a year. You graduated back in 2011. That's quite a significant investment in education. And since you earned an economics degree, you really should understand basic economic principles. He then connected his phone, ready to play some video clips. But then you come out with statements like these. The first clip showed AOC speaking at a town hall meeting. Her words, "Unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. People are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their kids." Kennedy paused the video. Ma'am, that's simply not how unemployment figures are calculated. Unemployment actually measures the percentage of people actively looking for work who are unable to find jobs. Whether someone holds 1 job or 3, they're counted identically in those statistics. This, frankly, is Economics 101. It's literally something covered within the first few weeks of any introductory course. He genuinely looked quite puzzled. Did they seriously not teach you that at BU? Or did you just happen to miss that particular class? The second clip, AOC speaking on a podcast. She claimed the Pentagon has lost $21 trillion. $21 trillion! Just imagine what we could do with that kind of money. Kennedy slowly shook his head. The Pentagon absolutely did not lose $21 trillion. That sum represents the entire federal budget for a whopping 8 years. They didn't just lose it. What actually occurred were accounting adjustments, entries that got duplicated across various ledgers during routine audits. It's just basic accounting. Anyone who has ever balanced a checkbook can easily understand this concept. The third clip showed AOC being asked how she planned to pay for her grand proposals. Her answer? Just pay for it. We paid for World War II. We paid for the moon landing. So just pay for it. Kennedy allowed that statement to linger in the air for a beat. Just pay for it. Young lady, that is decidedly not economic policy. That's precisely what my 7-year-old granddaughter says when she really wants a new toy. Just buy it, Paw. I patiently explained to her that we actually need money to purchase things. She's only 7 years old, and she's still learning these things. But you, with an economics degree, offer just pay for it as your answer. He set the videos aside and then produced a completely different kind of document. Congressional Productivity Reports. But perhaps I'm being overly critical of your grasp of economics. Let's instead examine what you've genuinely achieved during your time in Congress. After all, you've been a member for 7 years now, dating back to 2019. That's certainly a decent chunk of time. Surely, you've managed to pass some truly significant legislation. Kennedy then presented statistics sourced from GovTrack, a nonpartisan congressional tracking service. According to GovTrack's analysis, you've introduced the 5th fewest bills when compared to your New York congressional delegation. Yes, the 5th fewest. You are practically at the very bottom of that list. You've also joined bipartisan bills the 6th least often among all House Democrats. He then brought up a list of her proposed legislation. You've introduced bills covering housing, labor, the environment, and immigration. All good topics, and certainly important issues. But here's the crucial detail. According to GovTrack, most of that legislation sees absolutely no activity after its initial introduction. That means these bills simply go nowhere. No committee hearings, no votes, no passage into law, just a series of press releases. Kennedy carefully removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. You see, back when I was Louisiana State Treasurer for 17 years, I was responsible for managing real budgets and making real, impactful decisions. If I put forward a proposal, I absolutely had to demonstrate how it would function, how we would fund it, and what its ultimate consequences would be. I couldn't just casually say, "Trust me," or "just pay for it." I carried genuine responsibility on my shoulders. He looked at AOC with what could only be described as a hint of pity. You've been serving in Congress for 7 long years now. You're undeniably one of its most famous members. You appear on television constantly. You boast 14 million Instagram followers. But what have you actually achieved legislatively? What significant bills have you managed to get passed? Kennedy didn't wait for her to respond. I'll tell you exactly what you have accomplished. You've made yourself incredibly famous. You're exceptionally skilled at social media. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. He then pulled out some statistics. 14 million Instagram followers, 8.9 million Twitter followers. You post multiple times a day with thousands of posts and hundreds of TikTok videos. You're truly everywhere online. Kennedy leaned forward. "Young lady," he said, "help me understand something. You have time to make thousands of social media posts, but you don't have time to pass legislation. You have time to go to the Met Gala, but you don't have time to help your own grandmother. You have time for viral videos, yet you don't have time to pay the makeup artist." He gathered his papers. "My generation," he continued, "believed you earned respect through accomplishment, not just through followers. We believed you served people through results, not through Instagram stories. We believed if you were going to represent people, you actually did something for them." Kennedy's voice took on a more serious tone. "But there's one more thing we need to discuss. Something more serious than economics or social media. We need to talk about January 6th, 2021. Kennedy's demeanor shifted. While his folksy manner remained, his voice now carried an unmistakable gravity. "Ms. Ocasio-Cortez," he said, "January 6th was a dark day for our country. People died. Officers were injured defending the Capitol. It was a serious attack on our democratic institutions, which is why I need to ask you about your statements regarding that day." He then pulled out her Instagram video from February 2021. "You posted a video describing your experience. Very emotional, very detailed. Let's watch part of it." The video then played AOC recounting her fear, the banging on her door, the yelling, thinking she was going to die. Kennedy stopped it. "That's harrowing testimony. If it's true," he said, pulling out a map of the Capitol complex. "Now, let me show you something. This is the United States Capitol building." He pointed to the distinctive dome. "This is where the House chamber is. This is where the Senate meets. And this is where the breach occurred on January 6th. He pointed to another building on the map. "This is the Cannon House office building. That's where your office is located, about 200 yards away from the Capitol. A different building with a different security perimeter." Kennedy then pulled out an official Capitol Police report. "According to the Capitol Police incident reports, which I obtained through official channels, no rioters entered the Cannon House office building. None. The security perimeter held. The building remained secure throughout the incident." He read further from the report. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez remained in her Cannon House office throughout the incident. Building security was maintained. No unauthorized individuals gained access." Kennedy looked up. "So, when you described hearing banging on your door, hearing people yelling, 'Where is she?' that was actually a Capitol Police officer checking on your safety, doing his job. When he announced himself, you interpreted it as a threat." He then pulled out testimonies from members who actually were in the Capitol. Representative Jason Crow, a former Army Ranger, served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was in the House chamber when the breach occurred. He physically shielded other members with his own body. He was in actual danger. Representative Andy Kim spent hours after the attack helping janitors clean up broken glass and debris. He was actually there in the Capitol during and after the attack. Kennedy's voice hardened slightly. "You weren't. You were in a different building. You weren't in danger, but you went on Instagram and described a trauma that you didn't experience." He then pulled out more documents, fundraising emails sent in the weeks after January 6th, all featuring AOC's harrowing experience. "And then you fundraised on it. These emails went to millions of people, working Americans who believed you had survived a violent attack. They donated money because they thought you'd been through something terrible." Kennedy read from one email. "I thought this was it. I thought I wouldn't make it." Your words used to raise money. He then pulled out the final figure. Over $3 million. You raised over $3 million using a narrative about being in danger when you were actually safe in a different building. Kennedy stood up for the first time in the hearing. His full height and bearing truly commanded the room's attention. "Young lady," he stated, "in the military, they have a term for claiming combat experience you didn't have. They call it stolen valor. It's one of the most shameful things you can do. You claim trauma that belongs to others. You claim courage you didn't need to have." His voice carried an unmistakable moral authority. The people who were actually in the Capitol that day, the members who sheltered together, the officers who fought hand-to-hand with attackers, the staff who barricaded doors, they experienced real trauma. They showed real courage. And you actually took their story and made it all about yourself. Kennedy had collected every single document he'd shown. The stack included unpaid bills, detailed campaign finance reports, his legislative record, and even the Capitol Police reports. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, we've covered so much ground in the last hour, but every bit of it points to the very same story. And I believe it's time for us to have a really frank conversation about what that whole story truly shows. Kennedy stayed standing, and something about his posture just signaled that the careful build-up was finally over. The jury had now heard all the evidence. Now it was time for the verdict. Young lady, I'm going to be very direct with you right now, even more direct than I've been so far, because I truly think the American people deserve crystal-clear clarity about everything we've uncovered here today. He started counting on his fingers, that signature move of his, which viewers had grown to recognize as the clear prelude to a devastating summary. Point 1. You built your entire political brand, your whole identity, as a champion for working people. You were a bartender. You understand struggle. That's exactly what you told the voters. But the very moment you got to Congress, the instant you found some money and fame, you just completely abandoned those values. You actually went to a $30,000 project while working people were out there struggling. You wore a tax-the-rich dress while you were partying it up with billionaires. And perhaps most damning of all, you actually stiffed working people for a staggering $6,000. I'm talking about the makeup artist, the hairstylist, and the hotel workers. You made them all wait for months and months. Some even had to threaten legal action just to finally get paid. Point 2. You hold a degree in economics from Boston University. A fine education, I'm sure, but it seems you don't grasp even the most basic economic principles. You don't even know how unemployment is calculated. That's literally first-week material. You proposed a colossal $93 trillion plan with absolutely no funding mechanism beyond simply saying, just pay for it. You also claimed the Pentagon lost a mind-boggling $21 trillion when, in reality, it was merely a series of accounting adjustments. For someone with an economics degree, you appear remarkably fuzzy on how economics actually functions. Point 3. You built your entire reputation around the Green New Deal. You famously said the world would end in 12 years, demanding that Americans give up their cars, accept lower living standards, and make truly enormous sacrifices. But here's the thing. You made none of those sacrifices yourself. You spent 3 times more campaign money on Uber rides than on subway fares, even though your headquarters was literally just 1 minute from the subway. You drive a fancy $64,000 Tesla that's powered by fossil fuel electricity. You live in a luxury apartment while simultaneously telling working families that they need to sacrifice. Point 4. You've been in Congress for 7 long years now. According to nonpartisan tracking, you've introduced the fewest bills within your delegation, joined bipartisan efforts the least often, and let's be honest, most of your proposals end up going absolutely nowhere. But in that same time, you've made thousands upon thousands of social media posts. You're incredibly famous, but you're also completely ineffective. You're fantastic at grabbing attention, but you are simply not good at governing. Point 5. You claimed trauma that you, in fact, didn't even experience. You said you genuinely thought you were going to die on January 6th, but you weren't actually in the Capitol building itself. You were in a completely different building, perfectly safe, with security right there protecting you. Yet, you took that lie and somehow managed to raise a whopping $3 million from it. You exploited a genuine tragedy. You dishonored the brave people who actually faced real danger, and you used all of it to shamelessly enrich your own campaign. Kennedy's voice rose just slightly, still perfectly controlled, but now carrying an unmistakable conviction. Now, young lady, let me tell you a little something about my generation. When I was your age, just 35 years old, I was clerking for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. I was learning how the law actually works, in practice. Learning that you can't just say whatever you want. You absolutely have to back it up. You really have to do the work. I spent 17 years as Louisiana State Treasurer, where I managed billions of dollars, had to constantly balance budgets, make payroll, and maintain critical infrastructure. Every single dollar had to be accounted for to the penny, and every decision I made had very real consequences. I couldn't just casually say, "We'll pay for it later," or "Just trust me," or "I'll post a viral video about it." No, I had genuine, real responsibility. Kennedy's distinct drawl became even more pronounced now. His Louisiana roots were really shining through. My generation believed you earned respect through genuine accomplishment, not simply through amassing followers. You served people by passing real legislation, not by posting Instagram stories. You sacrificed for your deepest beliefs. You didn't demand that others sacrifice everything while you yourself lived a life of pure luxury. And you sure as hell didn't lie about being in grave danger just to raise money. He walked right to the edge of the platform, looking straight down at AOC. Young lady, you are clearly very talented, exceptionally good at social media, and absolutely brilliant at getting attention. You definitely know how to craft a message, how to work a camera, and how to make yourself truly famous. And yes, those are absolutely real skills in this modern world we live in. Kennedy paused for a moment. But governing, well, that requires so much more than just that. It requires true knowledge. I'm talking about real knowledge, not just empty slogans. It requires serious discipline. Things like paying your bills, doing your homework, and consistently following through. And it requires real sacrifice, actually giving up something important yourself, instead of just constantly demanding that others do it. And it requires integrity, telling the truth, even when it's not convenient, and serving people, even when there's no camera watching. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in that silent room, every word carried clearly. And from everything we've talked about today, every document, every video, every record, I haven't seen any evidence of those qualities. What I've observed is someone who's excellent at performance, but quite poor at governance. Someone who preaches sacrifice, yet lives in luxury. Someone who claims to champion working people while shortchanging workers. Someone who holds an economics degree, but doesn't grasp economics. Someone who's been in Congress for 7 years, but hasn't achieved much beyond making herself famous. Kennedy straightened up, his final assessment delivered with the gravitas of 5 decades in public service. Young lady, you embody everything that's amiss with modern politics. Style over substance, performance over results, fame over accomplishment, and social media metrics over real achievement. You've amassed a following by telling people exactly what they want to hear, but you haven't put in the hard work of truly serving them. He gathered his papers one last time. I have no further questions. Kennedy sat back, dismissing her with that simple gesture, as if she wasn't worth any more of his time. That silent communication was devastating. She had been judged, found lacking, and was no longer deemed worthy of his attention. AOC attempted to respond, her voice trembling. Senator Kennedy, you've cherry-picked incidents to construct a false narrative. Cherry-picked? Kennedy looked up, genuinely surprised. Ma'am, I am reading directly from your own financial disclosures, your own campaign reports, your own videos, your own Instagram posts. These are your words, your actions, your records. I'm merely asking you to clarify them. She tried again. My record speaks for itself. Yes, ma'am, it certainly does, Kennedy interrupted gently. That is precisely my point. Your record speaks very clearly, and what it reveals is that you're more interested in being famous than being effective. More interested in viral videos than in actual legislation. More interested in luxurious living than in living your values. The committee chairman intervened, sensing the political bloodbath was complete. Senator Kennedy, I believe you've made your points. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, you are excused. This committee will take the evidence presented today under advisement regarding potential ethics referrals. As AOC departed the witness table, her once confident entrance posture had vanished. Squad members in the gallery were noticeably quiet. Progressive media looked uncomfortable. Even friendly outlets were frantically typing, unable to ignore the documented evidence Kennedy had laid out. Within 2 hours, AOC Exposed was trending on Twitter. Cable news channels endlessly replayed Kennedy's greatest hits on a loop. That's not how unemployment is calculated. Just pay for it isn't economic policy. You weren't in the Capitol. You stiffed working people. Even liberal commentators struggled to defend her. Look, they conceded, Kennedy presented documented evidence. Those are her financial records. That is her FEC filing. That is the Capitol Police report. These aren't just opinions. They're facts. The squad remained largely silent, offering generic statements about staying focused on the work without any strong defenses of AOC. Progressive leaders privately grumbled that she had become a liability. In her district, community organizers quietly started approaching potential primary challengers. She's more concerned with being famous than representing us. The neighborhood desperately needs real help, not just Instagram posts. Conservative media had a field day. Country lawyer destroys AOC with simple questions. But even more damaging were the moderate outlets. Ocasio-Cortez struggles to explain lifestyle versus rhetoric. Documents show pattern of unpaid bills to workers. Capitol Police contradict AOC's January 6th account. That evening, AOC sat in her Navy Yard apartment, scrolling through the damage on her phone. Her team was in crisis mode. We need to change the narrative, someone urged. Can we get squad members to defend you? Maybe a viral response video. But the core problem was simple. Kennedy had used her own words, her own records, her own actions. There was nothing to spin. The facts were just the facts. In Washington, D.C., AOC paced her luxury apartment as her team tried desperately to contain the damage. The infinity pool visible through the window seemed to mock her working-class brand. Her phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, staffers, and concerned squad members. We can emphasize your legislative agenda, one aide suggested. Kennedy already pointed out she has the fewest bills. Another countered. What about the Green New Deal? He highlighted she spent more on Ubers than the subway. And that world-ending clip is everywhere. AOC tossed her phone onto the couch. So what do we do? Her chief of staff spoke very carefully. Honestly, we just ride this out. Just keep posting. Stay visible. Hope it all just blows over. But everyone knew the truth. In just 43 minutes, Kennedy had completely unraveled 7 years of her meticulously crafted public image. The former bartender, now Congresswoman, was exposed as nothing more than another political performer. All flash, no real substance. She stared at her laptop screen, watching the poll numbers in her district already dip, seeing the comments on her Instagram post turn sharply critical instead of supportive. She was facing the stark reality that 14 million followers couldn't shield her from the cold, hard facts. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy relaxed on his back porch in Madisonville, Louisiana. His home, valued at perhaps $300,000, a mere fraction of AOC's apartment price, offered a view of a serene bayou. He took sips of sweet tea, watching the sun slowly set over the water. His wife came out, carrying a plate of dinner. "You were pretty tough on her today," she remarked. Kennedy nodded slowly in agreement. "I was, but someone had to be. These folks, they come to Washington, get a little famous, and just forget why they were sent there in the first place. Do you think she'll learn? Maybe, maybe not," he mused, "but maybe some other young person watching will. They'll understand that true service is about more than just social media. Representing people means actually getting things done for them, not just posting about it online." Soon, a local news crew from WDSU New Orleans pulled up, ready for an interview. Kennedy motioned for them to take a seat in the chairs on the porch. His wife, ever the hostess, brought them all sweet tea. "Senator Kennedy, your questioning today went absolutely viral," the reporter began. "Millions of views. How do you feel about all that?" Kennedy paused, thinking over the question. "Well, I wasn't actually trying to go viral," he responded. "I was just trying to ask some simple questions. Questions any regular working person would want to ask. How do you make your money? Why haven't you paid your bills? What have you actually accomplished? Those aren't gotcha questions. Not really. They're just basic questions about accountability. Some people are saying you were too harsh on her given her age and lack of experience," another reporter chimed in. "I never once brought up her gender or her race or anything personal about her, did I?" he stated firmly. "I only spoke about her public record, her votes, her spending, and her statements. That's entirely fair game in politics. And as for experience, well, if you're planning to completely restructure the entire American economy, you really ought to understand how economies function. If you're going to claim to represent working people, then you better treat working people with respect. Age itself doesn't matter. Results are what truly matter." "What's the main takeaway you want people to get from today?" a reporter asked. Kennedy turned and looked directly into the camera lens. "I want people to remember that having a lot of social media followers doesn't automatically equal real accomplishment," he said. "Fame doesn't equal effectiveness. And simply posting about working families online doesn't mean you're actually helping them in any meaningful way. My generation learned that you serve people through sheer hard work, through tangible results, by actually doing things, not just by posting about them." He took another sip of his tea. "Now, that young lady, she's definitely talented. She's really good at media. She connects with people online, no doubt. But if she genuinely wants to serve those people, not just entertain them or inspire them, but if she wants to actually pass legislation that truly helps them, then she needs to put in the real work, read the bills, build coalitions, make compromises, and pass laws. That's what governing is all about. And it's a lot harder than just posting a video." The interview soon wrapped up. As the crew gathered their gear, Kennedy pitched in, helping carry equipment to their van, asking about their families, and wishing them a safe trip home. After they drove off, Kennedy settled back onto his porch. A neighbor walked by with his dog. He waved. "Hey, Senator," the neighbor called out. "Saw you on the news." "You really gave that girl what for?" Kennedy waved back, a small smile playing on his lips. "Just asking questions, Bobby. Just asking questions." He sat there with his wife as darkness slowly fell over the bayou. Somewhere far away in Washington, AOC was desperately trying to salvage her image. But here in Louisiana, a 73-year-old man who had never chased social media fame sat in peace, content in knowing he had simply spoken the truth. His wife eventually broke the comfortable silence. "You know what I really like about you?" she began. "What's that?" he asked. "You've been in politics for 40 years, and you still live in the same house, still sit on this very porch, still answer your own door. You've never forgotten where you came from, have you?" Kennedy just smiled. "Well, that's exactly the whole point, isn't it? All those fancy people up in Washington, they tend to forget. They gain a little power, a little money, a little fame, and then they completely forget why they're even there, who they're supposed to serve, what it feels like to struggle with bills, or worry about your kids, or constantly wonder if you'll have enough to get by." He gestured casually towards his modest home, the old truck in his driveway, and the peaceful neighborhood surrounding them. "This," he explained, "this keeps me honest. It reminds me exactly who I work for. Not for the people going to $30,000 parties, but for the folks who can't pay a $300 bill without it really hurting." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching fireflies softly dance over the water. In the distance, a church bell gently chimed 7 times. "You know," Kennedy said, deep in thought, "that young lady, she has a real choice now. She can either double down on the performance, just viral videos, more outrage, and a whole lot more noise. Or she could actually learn something valuable, really do the work, truly serve people, instead of just posting about serving them. Now, which do you think she'll choose?" Kennedy chuckled. "Well, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, mind you, I'd say she'll probably keep doing what's gotten her this far. See, fame is addictive. All those followers, that rush of attention, that feeling of being important. It's just so hard to give up." He stood up, stretched, and gazed out at his hometown one more time. "But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she'll actually surprise me. Or perhaps she'll decide that being truly effective matters more than just being famous, that serving people truly matters more than entertaining them, and that real results matter more than retweets." He opened the door for his wife. "And if she does learn that lesson, well, that might just be the best thing to come out of today's hearing. Not merely exposing what's wrong, but maybe even helping someone find their way to what's right." They went inside for a simple dinner. No cameras, no followers, no viral moments, just an honest life. Honestly lived in service to people who valued results over empty rhetoric. The bartender had certainly learned that Instagram likes don't exactly prepare you for a Louisiana cross-examination. The Oxford man had truly taught his lesson in substance over style. And somewhere out there, 14 million followers were finally learning that fame without genuine accomplishment is just